Hello, my friends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to hit that like button and share the video with your friends. Please support the channel if you can. I appreciate all the support. You can become a Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or you can make a one-off donation via PayPal if you wish. All the links are in the description box below. Thank you.
But going back to A Dweller on Two Planets, I wanted to talk about the kind of worldview of the Atlanteans, because it's very interesting to have seen this in 1882. Okay, so this is Frederick Oliver quoting, automatically writing what his Atlantean source Philos says. And they're talking about what was the religion and what was the scientific worldview in 11,160 BC? It's a great question. And he says, I have said that the Atlans recognize nature in its entirety to be deity externalized. Their philosophy asserted that force moved not in straight lines, but in circles. That is, so as always to return into itself. If the dynamism operating the universe acts in circular progression, it follows that an infinity of increase in vibration possible to one substance, capital, would be an untenable concept. There must be a point in the circle where extremes meet and run the round again. And this we find between cathodicity and magnetism. As vibration brought substance into the realm of light, it must carry it out. It does so. It conveys it into what the Poseidon termed navas, the night side of nature, where duality becomes manifest, cold opposing heat, darkness, light, and where positive polarity opposes negative, all things antipodal. Cold is as much a substantial entity as heat, and darkness as light. There is a prism of 7 colors in each white ray of light. There is also a septuple prism of black entities in the blackest gloom. The night is as pregnant as the day. The Poseidon investigator thus became cognizant of wondrous forces of nature, which he might bend to the uses of mankind. Through this wisdom, Atlantis found it possible to adjust weight to lack of weight, so evenly that no tug of war was manifest. This achievement meant much. It meant aerial navigation without wings, or unwieldy gas reservoirs. Through taking advantage of repulsion by levitation, opposed in overmatching strength to the attraction of gravitation. That vibration of the one substance governed and composed all realms was a discovery which solved the problem of the conveyance of images of light, pictures of forms. This is 1882, as well as of sound and heat. Just as the telephone, thou knowest, so well conveys images of sound, only in Poseidon, no wires or other sensible material connection was required in the use, at whatever distance, of either telephones or telephotes, nor even in calorivance, that is, heat conduction. And I'll finish.
Pretty impressive for a 17-year-old boy in the countryside in California.
I mean, if that's made up, well, then
he's a genius. I mean, who could?
Right. Because the words, I look at it like this backwards. The words are real. They exist. They were published. Somebody wrote those. All witnesses say it was Frederick Oliver, who's a real person, has a birth certificate, has witnesses. His mother published it, talked to a publisher, brought the manuscript. There's a real chain of custody. This is not a fake source that was retroactively written in 1985. This is a real source. So someone in 1882 knew that. And as science progresses in 2023, I believe we will rediscover this technology. Yeah. Because it's not a real stretch what he's saying. He's saying basically what I think eventually, we must rediscover if we are to break out of this kind of Newtonian very
Yes,
limited
yes,
sense
and
of
quantum
science.
physics has made us, I mean, approach that understanding, because, as you said before, I mean, they realized that there is only one substance, and
Right.
you have to raise the vibration of that substance in order to get different properties of that substance, which is, I mean, makes sense from a quantum mechanic point of view, I guess.
Yeah, it actually
it's not
is.
unfathomable to think that we might realize those things within a brief while.
No, and according to a lot of, I would say, fairly reliable, whistleblowers from places like Skunk Works or S4, not even people that necessarily were involved in, let's say, reverse engineering craft retrievals, but just people who worked on highly advanced government avionics, things like this. There are very reliable whistleblowers from the 80s, long before David Grush and these people, who said, listen, everything you see in Star Trek, we can do. Teleportation of devices, physical objects across a room, active cloaking in the 80s, levitation of huge object. In fact, there was a whistleblower who described a granite block being levitated in a laboratory somewhere in a military, facility. And it didn't seem that strange, because it's like, I mean, why is that, impossible? I always tell people, like, we've seen, that one exhibit, I forget at what tech fair, where a guy shows, like, with a superconducting ring, you can have something, a piece of metal flying around it. So it's like, okay, you can see that. You could go on YouTube and see, with a superconductor, you can move a piece of metal, with no gravity. And it's like, well, if you could do it on that, and by extrapolation, why couldn't you do it to build the pyramids? At the end of the day, I wanted to show that, look, like that passage I just read, there's nothing mystical about that passage I read, where he's describing, what we would say, oh, that's a spiritual explanation. No, it's a scientific, because at the end of the day, he even says there will come a day where science and spirituality merge, and you'll discover it's the same damn thing.
Because, I mean, if you had read that in 1498 or something, it would have appeared spiritual and woo-woo.
That's right.
But today
That's
it doesn't,
exactly
because
right.
we have, quantum physics and all that. So
exactly. And so I think that, if you can accept that, looking at a wave can convert it to a particle is not, which, if you can accept the quantum observation phenomenon, which I don't think is disputable at this point, that consciousness affects physicality. I mean, why is it such a stretch to think that in an extreme deployment of that, you could have people who at one point could levitate objects?
How would you explain the psychology of debunking new ideas? And it's not, as you say, not just in academia.
No, it's not just
among
academia.
Ordinary people as well. People are afraid of losing some worldview or something. I don't know.
Yes, I think it's like a multifaceted psychological, and it's a psychological phenomenon. It's actually not right. It's actually irrational. I find most debunkers are much more religious and fanatical in their thinking than they might even believe. I think, number one, we come from a Western cultural tradition that does not know how to come to grips with uncertainty. You've noticed that maybe in, school, or talking to your, friends over the years. As a professor, when I used to tell students, like, what, we actually have no idea what they didn't like that.
They want to know, how is it really?
Yes.
What's the situation?
Yeah, somebody must know. And it's like, no, there are a lot of things we actually do not know. Like, for example, no one on Earth, even if you believe, let's just say, the absurd concocted story that the Great Pyramid of Giza is a tomb for Khufu. Let's just roll with that for a moment.
What a joke.
Okay, fine. Okay, fine. Let's just say that. Okay, how was it built? No one can explain it. So the fact that no one actually has ever explained it, not in a computer simulation, not in AI, not any architect on earth has ever recreated it. You know, the Japanese tried to recreate it on scale. They couldn't even do a 1/50th scale using the technology that they claim existed at the time. That bothers people because we've been brainwashed since childhood, at least in the West where I grew up, that everyone knows. Your dad knows. Well, if he doesn't know, the government knows. Well, they don't know, God knows. You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Isaiah Berlin, who was a famous philosopher, he wrote a famous article on this in the 50s called The Pursuit of the Ideal. And he says, look, ever since ancient Greek times, the Western tradition prides itself on everything has an answer, even up to and including just God knows, you know? But it's like, what if nobody actually knows, you know?